Call 911. She's turning blue. Bernard Kellerman shouted, dropping his mop and sprinting forward. Gasps rippled through the executive boardroom. Minutes earlier, Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft, billionaire CEO of Ashcraft-Toft Holdings in Philadelphia, had been confidently presenting the quarterly numbers at the head of the long oak conference table. Then, mid-sentence, she froze. Her hand clutched her chest. Her breathing faltered. The room fell into a chilling silence as her body convulsed once, twice, and collapsed to the floor. At first, no one reacted. The executives froze. 7 men and women in suits worth more than Bernard earned in a year. Someone muttered, "She's joking." Another whispered, "Oh God, call security." Then reality struck. Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft wasn't moving. Her lips were turning purple. Bernard didn't hesitate. He pushed past the wall of perfume and designer suits. "Bernard, what are you doing?" someone shouted. "You don't belong here." Another barked. "Get out. I know CPR." Bernard yelled. But no one listened. Alexandra lay on her side, one arm limp across her chest. She wasn't breathing. Bernard dropped to his knees. "Ms. Ashcraft-Toft, can you hear me?" he whispered, panic rising. He checked her pulse. None. Then he acted. Once, he had taken a free CPR class at the West Philadelphia Community Center just to get a food voucher. But in that moment, the instructor's words echoed louder than anything else. "If they're not breathing, you are their lungs." He tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her. "Is he kissing her?" someone shrieked. "That's disgusting," another cried. A sharp pain tore across Bernard's back. A strike from something hard, maybe a security baton or an umbrella. He groaned but continued. 2 breaths, then chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another blow landed, and still he pressed on. "Don't," he whispered through gritted teeth. "Don't die like this." Someone grabbed his shoulder, yanking him back. Bernard tore free and resumed compressions, leaning down for 2 more breaths. Then Alexandra's chest jerked violently. She coughed, drawing in air like a diver surfacing. Her eyelids fluttered. She was breathing. Bernard collapsed, trembling. His back burned, shoulders raw, hands numb, but she was alive. The executives swarmed her now, panicking, tripping over each other. Paramedics burst in, lifted Alexandra onto a stretcher, and one asked, "Who started CPR?" "I did," Bernard said, voice weak. Before he could say more, a tall man with silver hair stepped forward. His badge read Tyler Bygam, CFO. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Bernard Kellerman," he replied, standing tall. "I'm a janitor." "You put your mouth on Ms. Ashcraft-Toft," the man said, as if Bernard had contaminated her instead of saving her life. "She wasn't breathing," Bernard replied. "I'll be reviewing the security footage," the CFO snapped. "Leave immediately and do not return until contacted." Bernard's throat tightened. His back throbbed. He looked around at the executives whose boss he had saved. Not a single thank you. With trembling hands, he grabbed his bucket and pushed it out of the boardroom, each step heavier than the last. Unaware to him, something entirely different was unfolding inside the hospital, a moment that would change his life forever. That night, Bernard sat hunched on a crowded bus, trying to disappear into the crowd. City lights stretched into blurred lines across his tired, hollow eyes. By the time he reached his neighborhood, only distant train rumblings and kids' laughter filled the air. Molly ran to meet him barefoot, clutching her worn teddy bear. "You're home late," she said, voice small and worried. "Are you okay, Daddy?" "I'm okay, sweetheart," Bernard said, a lie he had grown too used to. Dinner was reheated mac and cheese and leftover stir-fried vegetables. Molly chattered about school, while Bernard nodded, his mind still trapped in that cold boardroom. When neighbor Janet Holloway waved goodbye, Bernard forced a smile, though his lips felt heavy. After Molly fell asleep, he lay on the thin mattress, listening to the heater sputter in the dark. His fingers brushed the bruise along his back, sharp, throbbing pain. He closed his eyes, but the image of Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft lying unconscious beneath his hands refused to leave him. The memory replayed over and over like an overexposed film. He had saved a woman's life, Yet all anyone saw was a poor janitor, a single father, daring to touch a billionaire. Bernard didn't know it yet, but that moment, the one where he breathed life back into someone fading away, was about to reshape his future, just not in the way he hoped. The next morning, Bernard Kellerman stood in front of Ashcraft Holdings Tower, wearing the same gray uniform he had pulled on for the past 3 months. The sun had barely risen, spilling soft amber light across the plaza. He gripped his lunch bag, a simple plastic sack holding a peanut butter sandwich, a bruised apple, and a fragile hope that today would be normal. He stepped toward the revolving door, but an arm shot out to block him. "Sir, you can't enter," said the security guard, voice flat. Bernard blinked. "What?" "I work here, night shift, 22nd floor." The guard didn't look at him. "I was instructed not to let you in." A cold shiver ran down Bernard's spine. "Why?" "I didn't do anything wrong." "Contact Human Resources," the man said, turning away. Bernard froze. Office workers streamed past, absorbed in their own worlds. He felt invisible. Pushed completely out of sight, he circled to the side entrance, clinging to hope that this was a mistake, maybe a schedule error, maybe someone needed to talk about the CPR. At the service desk, the night shift supervisor appeared, expressionless. Bernard waited in the narrow hallway beside the row of staff lockers, his name still scribbled crookedly on locker number 7. 10 minutes later, the supervisor returned, holding a sealed envelope. "You're terminated," he said. Something inside Bernard snapped, sharp, brutal, like a bone breaking in his chest. "Terminated? But why? What did I do?" The supervisor shrugged. "HR said inappropriate conduct involving senior personnel. That's all I know." Bernard's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a termination letter and his final paycheck. No evidence, no explanation, just employment ended immediately. The words inappropriate conduct echoed like an alarm in his mind. Bernard stood in that narrow hallway for a long time, as if the single door closing behind him had sealed his fate. Outside, life continued as if nothing had happened. People sipped lattes, taxis honked, phones rang. And Bernard walked on, an empty shell. He slumped onto a bus stop bench. His phone buzzed. A co-worker's message, a screenshot from the group chat. "See that? That janitor creep was all over Ms. Ashcraft when she passed out. Looked like he was kissing her." Another disgusting. Was that assault? Bernard's chest tightened. His fingers went cold. They had twisted the truth. CPR, the breath that saved her life, turned into something vile. Another message, a blurry still from the security camera. Bernard leaning down toward Alexandra Ashcraft. A moment of heroism turned into damning evidence. He let the phone drop. Above him, a billboard showed Alexandra Ashcraft smiling beside the slogan, "Integrity, Vision, Leadership." Bernard felt sick. The bus carried him back to his dim apartment in West Philadelphia. Molly ran out to meet him. "You're home early?" "They fired me," he said. Her eyes widened. "Why?" "I don't know." He forced a smile. "Just a misunderstanding." Janet watched from the kitchen counter. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, Janet," Bernard said. Another lie. "Just tired." Night fell. He lay on the thin mattress, heater sputtering. Somewhere in the hallway, an argument erupted. Then a child cried softly. Life carried on, except Bernard's felt frozen. He turned on his phone. Messages flooded in. A voice message from the service desk girl. "Hey, I'm not sure what happened, but people are saying you did something inappropriate with Ms. Ashcraft. Maybe stay quiet for a while." Bernard turned off the phone, letting it fall onto the mattress. Inappropriate. Such an easy word for those who want to believe the worst. He closed his eyes, remembering Alexandra's chest jerking back to life under his hands, the first breath returning to her. He had saved a life, and now they treated him like a criminal. His face buried in the pillow, Bernard cried. Saving someone should have been a good thing, but in this city, in this world, it had erased his own life. Tomorrow, he would have to find another job, knock on doors, clean wherever they would hire him. But tonight, the injustice was too heavy. High above the city, in a softly lit penthouse, Alexandra Ashcraft jolted awake from a nightmare, clutching her chest, heart pounding. She didn't know his name yet. Sitting on the edge of her king-size bed, sweat-drenched, she felt the early morning light slip through the thin curtains, casting a cold, pale gold across the room. Her heart pounded violently, as if trying to burst through her ribs. The nightmare had returned, the fourth night in a row. She was suspended in pitch-black emptiness, arms reaching, grasping, suffocating. No sound, no light, only a void swallowing everything. Then the voice came again, a man's voice, trembling yet steady, cutting through the darkness. "Come on, breathe. Come back." Each time, she jolted awake, gasping as though pulled from the deep. And each time, the name of the man behind that voice slipped through her memory before she could catch it, leaving only a familiar pull lingering in her chest. Alexandra rubbed her face, took a steadying breath, and rose. Barefoot, she walked across the cool marble floor into the kitchen. The coffee machine beeped softly, the brew scheduled perfectly since the night before. Her assistant always ensured everything was flawless, down to the minute. As the rich aroma filled the air, Alexandra leaned against the counter, eyes drifting toward the city below. Philadelphia was waking beneath her, taxis, bicycles, street vendors setting up carts. She stood on the 39th floor, sealed off from the world by glass, money, and silence. Yet this morning, something felt off. She picked up her phone, scrolling through emails, contract approvals, press briefs, a video interview request from a PR firm. Nothing mentioned the incident. She checked the internal portal, still nothing. Her brow tightened. Someone had saved her life. Doctors had been clear. She had suffered sudden cardiac arrest. Survival rates in cases like hers were under 10% without immediate CPR. Someone had kept her alive, breath by breath, until paramedics arrived. And yet, no one had told her who it was. Her executives had been polite, evasive. "The situation has been handled, ma'am. We've taken the appropriate internal measures." Those words made her skin prickle. Who had touched her chest? Who had pressed their mouth to her face, breathing life back into her lungs? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that dream. The raspy, strained but unwavering voice pulling her back from the edge. She could almost feel the hands again, the pressure on her ribs, the heat of breath near her face. Who was he? Why wouldn't anyone tell her? Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft was not the type to be kept in the dark. Not in her own company, and certainly not about her own survival. She picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Marcus," she said as the head of security answered. "I want the security footage from the boardroom on the morning of the incident." "Ma'am, HR has already reviewed the recording. Legal is holding a copy." "I didn't ask who reviewed it," Alexandra replied, voice sharpening. "I want it in my inbox now." "Yes, ma'am." She ended the call and returned to the window. The glass reflected only faint fog in her pale, exhausted, distant face. A woman pulled back from the edge without ever knowing who reached for her. 20 minutes later, the email arrived. She opened the video. On the screen, the cold, indifferent eye of a surveillance camera captured her. Standing at the head of the glass conference table, mid-speech, she faltered. One hand flew to her chest. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Her body wavered, then collapsed like a soaked sheet. People jumped to their feet. Some screamed. Others looked around, but no one stepped forward. Then the door at the far end of the room flew open. A man in a gray janitor's uniform entered, pushing a mop bucket. Alexandra leaned closer. At first, he looked startled. Then he saw her on the floor and lunged forward without hesitation. He knelt beside her, checked for a pulse, pinched her nose, performed rescue breaths, and laced his fingers over her sternum, counting each compression aloud. She watched his face closely, clenched jaw, tear-rimmed eyes, burning fear and determination. He ignored the shouts, the pointing fingers, the accusations. He focused only on one thing, keeping her alive. Then she saw him, Tyler Bygam, her CFO, approach. His face twisted with anger and disgust. He grabbed the janitor's shoulder and yanked him away. Alexandra hit pause, hands shaking. She watched the rest of the footage in silence. The janitor was escorted out like a criminal. No handshake, no thank you, no acknowledgement. He had saved her life. and been punished for it. Alexandra rose slowly, chest tightening, not from her heart, but from fury. She called again. "Marcus," she said, voice low and cold as steel. "Where is Bernard Kellerman?" "Ma'am, the man in the video. The janitor, what happened to him?" There was a brief pause. "He was terminated by HR. Certain allegations." "Allegations?" Alexandra nearly hissed. "He saved my life." "Ma'am, there are concerns about optics, liability, media risk." "Then, listen carefully." Alexandra cut him off. "Find him. Address, file, everything. I want on my desk before noon." "Yes, Ms. Ashcraft." She hung up, exhaling slowly. Her pristine kitchen suddenly felt empty. For the first time since waking in the hospital, something cracked beneath her sternum. Not pain, shame, but fury. Far below, in West Philadelphia, Bernard Kellerman knew nothing. He didn't know she had watched the footage. Didn't know she was replaying the image of his face. Didn't know the world that had already crushed him once was about to shake again. But soon he would. 3 days passed, and Bernard Kellerman still hadn't found a job. Mornings slipped by in silence, the only sound the scratch of an old red pen wedged in the sofa, circling job listings in the classifieds. Afternoons were spent going door to door, laundromats, diners, cleaning companies, any place that might pay enough to keep the lights on in his small apartment. Everywhere he went, the answer was the same. Hesitant glances, hushed whispers, polite shakes of the head, colder than the winter air outside. By the fourth morning, Bernard Kellerman had become a rumor, spreading like smoke. At the corner laundromat, a young woman folding clothes glanced up. "You're the guy from that building, right?" "The one who—" He looked up, but she trailed off. "Never mind. It's nothing." Bernard tried to smile, but it never reached his eyes. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can say it. The man who tried to save someone and got fired for it." She pressed her lips together, voice dropping lower. People say you did more than that." Bernard didn't ask what more than that meant. He already knew. The internet had taken his CPR and twisted it into something vile. Trashy blogs blasted headlines. Janitor couldn't keep his hands to himself. Crossing the line with unconscious female CEO. Someone had leaked a still frame from the security footage. Blurry, grainy, but clear enough to plant doubt. His act of saving a life had become evidence against him. Back home, the small apartment smelled of old carpet and reheated coffee. Janet Holloway sat by the window, glasses perched on her nose, reading the newspaper. The city council rejected the minimum wage raise again. She muttered, then looked up. "Have you eaten yet?" "Not yet," Bernard said, rinsing a mug in the sink. "Let me fix something for Molly first." Molly shuffled in, hair tousled, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, are you going to work today?" "Not today, sweetheart," he said gently. "I'm taking a little break." Molly frowned. Janet said quietly, "People are being mean to you." "What?" Bernard bent down and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. But things will be okay. I promise." Janet folded the newspaper with a sigh. "Son, you can't fight the ones who write the stories. They always win." "I don't want to fight," Bernard said quietly. "I just want them to tell the truth." That afternoon, he went to a small cleaning service on 18th Street. The owner, heavy-set, smelling faintly of cigar smoke, glanced at his paperwork and then shook his head. "You used to work at Ashcraft Holdings?" "Yes, sir. I've heard about that situation," the man said bluntly. "I can't afford that kind of attention here." "I'm sorry." "Attention? You mean saving someone's life?" Bernard asked, throat dry. "Controversy," the man said. "Clients don't like trouble. Try somewhere else." Outside, the sky had darkened. Wind cut through his thin coat as he walked toward the bus stop. A group of teenagers stood outside a convenience store, phones glowing blue. As he passed, one nudged a friend. "Yo, that's him, the janitor guy. I saw the clip. Dude was kissing that billionaire lady for real." Laughter chased him down the block. By the time he reached the bus stop, his eyes burned. He sat down, head bowed, arms wrapped around himself. At home, Janet was on the phone, hushed. Seeing him, she cupped the receiver. "It's your sister. She says people at church are talking. They saw some video online." Bernard closed his eyes. Of course they did. That night, he tried to delete his social media accounts, but every time he did, another fake profile appeared. Pictures of him with vicious captions. Single dad hunting billionaire. Man who assaulted female CEO. He shut the phone off and sat in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left in the world. When he lay down beside Molly, his body felt like lead. His back still ached from the blows he'd taken in the boardroom. He pressed a hand to the bruise, remembering the sharp, dull crack, the breath forced from his lungs. Justice isn't blind, he whispered. It just refuses to look down. In the middle of the night, the phone rang. He jolted awake. Mr. Kellerman, a sharp, cold, scripted voice said. Yes. This is Human Resources from Ashcraft Holdings. Our internal investigation is complete. His heart lurched. So, does that mean your employment has been terminated, effective immediately? The woman cut in. The internal review has determined your conduct to be inappropriate. We will not be pursuing charges, but we strongly advise you not to return to the premises. Bernard shot upright. Inappropriate? I was performing CPR. She wasn't breathing. The decision is final, Mr. Kellerman. Your last check will be mailed to you. The line went dead. Clean. Merciless. As if he had never existed at all. For a long moment, he sat there, phone pressed to his ear, staring into the dark. Molly shifted, mumbling something about pancakes in her sleep. He looked at her, chest aching. What was he supposed to tell her in the morning? That her father had lost his job for saving a life? That truth doesn't matter when the one telling it is poor and invisible? Bernard leaned back against the headboard, eyes burning. God, he whispered. If you're listening, what am I supposed to do now? Outside, thunder rolled. Rain drummed against the window. The leaky gutter tapped a steady rhythm, like a mocking heartbeat. On the other side of the city, in a brightly lit penthouse, Alexandra Ashcraft sat in front of her laptop. The video had finished playing, but the image of Bernard kneeling beside her was still burned into her mind. She saw the fear on his face, the determination, the courage, and the horror as he was dragged away like a criminal. Alexandra hit pause again, leaning back in her chair, shoulders rigid. She had built $1 billion empire on decisive choices and faith in her chain of command. Yet this had slipped past her like smoke, and it had nearly destroyed a man. Her jaw tightened. Find him, she murmured into the quiet room. Before this goes too far. Alexandra didn't call her driver. She pulled on jeans, a sweater, and grabbed her car keys. The black Mercedes glided through the city like a shadow, heading west. Glass and steel towers gradually gave way to old brick buildings, peeling murals, and windows boarded with warped plywood. It had been a long time since she had driven herself anywhere. This felt right. The neighborhood where Bernard lived was a world apart from her kingdom of glass and gold. Potholes rattled her wheels. Children played on muddy lots, chasing each other around rusted cars. A man sold hot dogs from a battered cart, steam rising in thick clouds against the biting cold. She found the address, a low, brown building with peeling paint and a sagging metal staircase. She parked and stepped out. The December air slashed at her neck like a knife. She knocked. A few seconds of silence passed before the door creaked open. A little girl appeared, hair tied haphazardly, t-shirt too thin for the weather. Her eyes widened. You're the lady from the billboard, she whispered. I'm looking for Bernard, Alexandra said softly. He lives here, doesn't he? The girl's face pinched with worry. He's sick, she said quietly. He won't get up. I tried making soup. I tried giving him medicine. Nothing worked. He just keeps saying he's tired. Then he lies down again. Alexandra's throat tightened. How long has he been like this? Since he lost his job, the girl replied. He stopped eating. He kept saying it's not fair. Then he just stopped. Alexandra pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, with faded walls and a heater rumbling, but barely warming the room. Bernard lay curled on a thin mattress, tucked into a corner, wrapped in 2 warm blankets. His face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, breath frighteningly shallow. She knelt beside him. Bernard, she whispered. It's me, Alexandra Ashcraft. He didn't move. She took his hand. It burned with fever. Call an ambulance, she shouted toward the hallway. The girl stood frozen, clutching a ragged teddy bear, eyes wide. Alexandra squeezed Bernard's hand harder. "You saved my life," she said, her voice cracking. "Now it's my turn to save yours." The distant wail of sirens echoed through the street. Alexandra looked at the man who had pulled her back from death and understood one thing clearly. She could not let him slip away. The ambulance arrived, lights spinning silently. Paramedics worked fast, asking quick, clip questions. Alexandra barely registered Bernard being lifted onto the stretcher. She stepped in after him without hesitation, ignoring neighbors peeking from windows and porches. Inside the vehicle, a paramedic clipped an oxygen monitor to Bernard's finger and wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm. Severe dehydration, fever above 103, shallow breathing. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Alexandra gripped the edge of her seat. I just found him like this." "No," the paramedic muttered. "This is systemic stress. We got to stabilize him fast." He hung in 4 bag from the hook above. The ambulance jolted onto the main road. Alexandra glanced down at Bernard's ashen, sunken face, beads of sweat on his forehead. She slipped her hand into his, careful of the 4 tubing. His fingers didn't move, but she didn't let go. "You fought to keep me alive," she murmured. "Don't quit now." The paramedic's eyes widened as recognition flashed across his face. "You're Alexandra Ashcraft." She nodded stiffly. He looked from her to Bernard. "He's the one who—" "Yes," she said. Respect softened his expression. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a private medical center on the north side, one of the best in the city. Alexandra had called ahead. Doctors and nurses waited at the emergency entrance and swiftly took over, pushing Bernard through the double doors. A nurse lifted a hand to stop her. "We'll take care of him, Miss Ashcraft. Please wait here." Alexandra nodded, eyes tracking the stretcher until it disappeared behind the swinging doors. The waiting room was nearly perfect. Soft leather chairs, warm lighting, a piano in the corner playing gentle jazz. But to Alexandra, it all felt submerged, muffled. She sat, stood, paced, then sat again. She called Fiona Redford, her legal assistant. "He's at Northside Medical. Cancel everything for the next 2 days and bring his daughter, Molly, here. She's alone at home." "I'll do it right away," Fiona replied without hesitation. About an hour later, Molly arrived with a social worker. Alexandra stood by the window, watching thin snowflakes fall across the Philadelphia skyline. She turned when she heard the girl's voice. "Is my dad okay?" She knelt to be at eye level with Molly. "The doctors are taking care of him. Your dad is very strong. He saved my life once, remember? I believe he can do it again." Molly nodded, hugging her teddy bear tight. "I made soup for him, but he wouldn't eat. I tried my best." "You did more than your best," Alexandra said gently. "You cared for him the way he cared for me." A nurse appeared. "Ms. Ashcraft, you can see him now." Alexandra took Molly's hand and followed the nurse through a quiet hallway into a private room. Bernard lay on the bed, oxygen tube beneath his nose for drip steady. His chest rose and fell slowly, steadily. "He'll pull through," the nurse said softly. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition. His immune system crashed under stress, but he's responding well. His vitals are improving." Alexandra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said. Molly stepped to the bedside and placed her teddy bear on her father's chest. "I took care of you, Daddy," she whispered. Alexandra stayed by the bed, watching Bernard. His face was less gray now, lines softer, less shattered. She pulled up a chair and remained there for a long time. At one point, Molly fell asleep in the corner, curled under a blanket. A nurse brought hot soup and crackers, but Alexandra barely touched hers. She simply watched Bernard, her mind spinning with guilt and relief. She remembered the board meeting that morning, the way no one looked at him, the way even she hadn't spared him a glance. He had stepped into that room like air, and yet, that invisible man had been the one to save her life. It hadn't just been CPR. It had been defiance of power, facing fear, standing against a system that expected him to bow his head, stay silent, and disappear. She couldn't erase what had happened, but she could, and would, change everything that happened next. Hours passed. Night settled in completely. The only sounds were the steady beeps of the monitors and Molly's soft breathing. Then, without warning, Bernard stirred. His eyelids fluttered, his fingers twitched. Alexandra shot to her feet. Bernard, his head tilted, eyes opening, blinking several times before focus returned. "Where am I?" he rasped. "You're in the hospital," she said gently. "You collapsed, but you're safe now." He frowned, voice barely a whisper. Why are you here?" She knelt beside him, her voice steady but soft. "Because I watched the footage. All of it. Every second. I saw what you did. You saved my life, and they punished you for it. Bernard, I am truly sorry." Tears welled in his eyes. "They said I assaulted you," he whispered. "I know," she answered, jaw tightening. "They lied, and I'll let them lie on my behalf. But it won't be like that anymore." He turned away, blinking hard. "It doesn't matter. I'm just a janitor. Someone like me. No one believes, no matter what I say." "I believe you," she said slowly. "Not just because I saw the video, but because I felt it. In that moment, you were the only one who did anything. The only one who didn't turn away." Bernard looked back at her. His voice was weak, but clear. "Then help me, not just with doctors or bills. Help me be seen. Help my daughter grow up in a world where doing the right thing doesn't mean losing everything." Alexandra nodded once, then again, firmer. "I will." She stood, looking at him one more time, then whispered, "You're not invisible anymore." Morning light slipped through the hospital curtains, drawing quiet streaks across the pale green walls. Bernard was asleep, his breathing steady, his face softer, warmer. Beside him, Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft sat back in an armchair, elbows resting on her knees, eyes never leaving the man who had shaken her entire world simply by doing what no one else had dared to do. All night, she hadn't left the room. The weight of guilt clung to her shoulders like a wet blanket, heavy, cold, suffocating. For a woman who had built a billion-dollar empire by making hard decisions, this had slipped through her fingers like smoke, nearly sweeping away an entire human life. She took out her phone and opened Bernard's file. Fiona had stayed up all night, piecing together everything she could find, stitching it into a full picture the rest of the world had carelessly thrown away. Name: Bernard James Kellerman. Age: 34. Education: high school diploma. 1 year of community college and nursing. Dropped out due to financial hardship. Employment history: cleaning services, part-time elderly care, food delivery. Family: 1 daughter, Molly. Ex-wife, Charlotte Reed. Custody revoked 3 years ago. Address: West Philadelphia. Known for high crime rates and decaying infrastructure. Additional notes: 2 months behind on rent. Electricity cut off the previous week. Eviction notice from prior landlord attached. Alexandra swallowed hard. All of this had happened after he saved her life. She stepped into the hallway. A nurse pushed a cart past and nodded politely. Alexandra found a small, quiet corner near the family waiting area, leaned against the wall, and called Fiona. "Yes, Miss Ashcraft-Toft." Fiona answered almost immediately. "Send 2 cars to West Philadelphia. 1 for his daughter, 1 for the neighbor who's been watching her. Move them to temporary housing, fully furnished, safe, near a good school." "Understood." "Also, call Dr. Morrison. I want Janet Holloway to have a full medical checkup today." "Comprehensive." "I'll arrange it," Fiona replied. "And one more thing," Alexandra added, voice softening slightly. "Make sure there's a small bed or crib in the new place, in case Molly is too scared to sleep alone." There was a pause. "I understand, ma'am." Alexandra hung up and returned to the room. Bernard was now propped up on pillows. His eyes were still heavy with exhaustion, but far clearer than the night before. Molly sat beside him, legs swinging off the chair, coloring intently with pencils a nurse had scrounged up. When she saw Alexandra, she beamed. Milishavona Shkrafov. Muli. How's your dad?" "He's better now," the girl chirped, holding up her drawing. "He smiled when I showed him this." Alexandra turned to Bernard. "You're back with us now, aren't you?" "It's not like I had anywhere else to go," he replied dryly, though the corner of his mouth twitched. "You really watched the footage?" "All of it." "Yes," Alexandra confirmed. "I watched you fight to keep me alive while everyone else stood frozen." and then I watched them treat you like a criminal. Bernard, I'm deeply sorry. Bernard tilted his head back, staring at the ceiling. Sorry doesn't change what they did. No, she agreed, but it's a starting point. And so is this. She reached in her coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded sheet of paper. This is an official statement, Alexandra said, handing him a neatly folded piece of paper. Signed and notarized under my name, clearing your record. It states your actions were emergency medical intervention, life-saving and entirely appropriate under the circumstances. No misconduct. No violation. Bernard hesitated, fingers trembling slightly as he unfolded the page. His eyes scanned each line, lips parting ever so slightly. And there's more, Alexander continued. I've had your daughter and your neighbor moved to a safe, fully furnished apartment until you're back on your feet. And I want to offer you a position. He snapped his head up. What? No, you don't have to, she cut in, voice gentle but firm. Because I allowed them to dismantle your life under my name. I can't erase what they've done, but I can make sure that from now on, you're never left standing alone again. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. Why? Why do you care now? She fell silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because when I was on the edge of death, I didn't see a janitor. I saw a man fighting to keep me alive. And after I survived, I let the world erase you. That made me complicit. I don't want to be that person anymore. Molly looked up, cutting in. I told you, Dad. She's a good person. Bernard exhaled, half laugh, half surrender. You've always been better at judging people than I am. Alexandra smiled faintly. There's one more thing. If you're willing to hear it, I want to offer you a role, not in cleaning. You would be the director of a new employee welfare program I'm launching at Ashcraft Holdings. Bernard's eyes widened. Excuse me, what? I want you to help design a system that ensures no one gets left behind again, especially the people who keep the lights on and the floors clean. I want you to be the one to rebuild what I've allowed to rot. He stared at her, stunned. Last night, she went on, you said you didn't just need help. You needed to be seen. That line has been looping in my head ever since. Bernard gripped the edge of the blanket. I don't have the qualifications for something like that. You do, Alexandra said, stepping closer. Because you understand. You know what it feels like to be treated as invisible. And now, you have the chance to change that for others. Bernard glanced at Molly, then back at Alexandra. I need time to think. Of course, she nodded. Take all the time you need. She turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. Oh, Bernard, you saved me once. Maybe this is my chance to return the favor. The door closed behind her. Bernard leaned his head back against the pillow, the statement still in his hand. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of his story. Maybe it was only the beginning. 2 days later, Bernard crossed the threshold of the new apartment for the first time. His legs still shook after days in the hospital, his right hand bandaged where the 4 had been. But all of that suddenly felt small. He stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. Warm golden light washed over the cozy space. No more cracked, peeling walls. No more flickering ceiling bulb. No more wheezing heater coughing in the corner. Instead, there was a beige sofa with clean cushions, a low wooden coffee table, a soft rug underfoot, and curtains matching the walls. The apartment carried a faint scent of lemon mingled with the smell of new fabric, the scent of a beginning. Molly shot past him, eyes wide, laughter ringing. We have our own kitchen, Daddy. Look, there's even cereal in the cabinet. Bernard blinked, fighting down the salt rising at the corners of his eyes. Janet, their neighbor, stepped in slowly behind them, leaning on the new walker the hospital had given her. Her back was still bent, her legs stiff, but her eyes were brighter than they had been in weeks. Oh, my Lord, she muttered. I haven't seen a place this clean and decent since your Aunt Beatrice's wedding. Bernard laughed, shaky but genuine. The 3 of them stepped fully inside and closed the door like closing an old chapter. For the first time in a long time, they didn't feel like squatters in a place that didn't want them. This time, this was their home. On the kitchen counter sat a welcome package with his name on it. Next to it, a small vase of white daisies. A card was tucked under the base. You deserve peace. Bernard folded the card and pressed it lightly to his chest, as if pinning down a memory. In the days since leaving the hospital, he hadn't seen Alexandra in person again. But her fingerprints were everywhere. Private medical care for him and Janet, a full-service moving company, pre-booked therapy sessions for Molly. The job offer still sat in his email inbox. She hadn't pushed. She hadn't called to demand an answer. She had simply opened a space for him to choose. And right now, that was what he appreciated most. He stepped into the kitchen, taking in the gleam of stainless steel appliances. In the fridge, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a pack of eggs, more than he'd had at once in weeks. Molly opened a cabinet and pulled out a box of colored pencils. "There's paper, too. Daddy, I get to draw again." Janet eased herself onto a bar stool, eyes sweeping the room. "Son, you sure this isn't some kind of trap? No landlord is this kind without wanting something back." Bernard turned to her. "She hasn't asked me for anything." Janet narrowed her eyes, still skeptical. But for Bernard, for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to simply breathe and to hope. "No one gives this much without wanting something sooner or later," Janet murmured softly. Bernard was quiet for a few seconds before answering. "She's not handing down charity. She's giving me back justice. And maybe this is how she's doing it." Janet snorted softly. "Justice is supposed to show up before they drag your name through the mud, not after everything's already broken." Bernard didn't argue. He didn't know how to anyway. He walked into the small bedroom at the end of the hallway. A queen-size bed with clean sheets, a wardrobe, a bedside lamp. No moldy windows, no chipped corners on the wall. On the nightstand sat a small stack of books, titles on leadership, employee welfare, and one about surviving public scandal. On the last book's cover, a sticky note was attached. Page 47. "It once helped me." Bernard let out a faint, almost disbelieving chuckle, then sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the soft comforter. From the living room, Molly's voice drifted in. "Daddy, can I go downstairs and see the little garden?" "Later, sweetheart," Bernard called back. "We got a lot of boxes to unpack first." Janet shuffled to the doorway with her walker, leaning against the frame. "You really thinking about taking that job?" Bernard looked up, honest. "I don't know yet. Just hearing about it is scary." Janet's voice softened unexpectedly. "You knelt in the middle of a boardroom and faced down death without your hands shaking. And now an office job scares you." "It's not the job," Bernard said quietly. "It's being seen." That night, after Molly had fallen asleep in her twin bed with dinosaur sheets, and Janet was settled on the couch, Bernard stepped out onto the small balcony. City lights glittered in the distance. Not so far that he felt cut off, but far enough to remind him how far he'd come in just a few days. He sat in the wicker chair, pulling a light blanket around his shoulders, letting his thoughts spill freely. The injustice was still there. The rumors online hadn't vanished. People still whispered his name at the corner store. Anonymous messages buzzed occasionally on his phone. But in this quiet moment, he felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not safety, not yet, but the sense that things were still capable of changing. His phone buzzed. A new message from Alexandra Ashcraft-Toft. "No pressure, but I'd be honored if you'd come see the new office space. It's yours to shape. Whatever you dream up, start there." Attached was a photo of an empty office floor. Wide windows, sunlight pouring in, freshly painted walls, spotless floors waiting for the first footsteps. Bernard stared at it for a long time. He could almost see it. A place without front doors for the wealthy and back doors for the cleaners. A place where benefits meant more than a bowl of fruit in the break room. A place where voices like his weren't just allowed, they were needed. He typed back, "I'll come take a look, one step at a time." His fingers hovered. Then he added, "Thank you for giving me room to breathe." He set the phone down, leaned back, and closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, Bernard slept without waking in fear. Next Monday, Bernard stood in front of the gleaming glass building in River North. The wind carried the smell of freshly roasted coffee, and the sidewalk still shimmered from the rain. He adjusted his scarf and looked up at the sign. Ashcraft-Toft Holdings Executive Annex. Fiona's message was still clear. 3rd floor, elevator on the right. She'll be waiting. As he stepped into the lobby, Bernard could feel eyes on him. But this time it wasn't suspicion or weariness. It was recognition. The security guard nodded. The receptionist smiled warmly. Small gestures, but to Bernard, they were the kind of acknowledgement he had never truly had before. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto a completely empty open floor, sunlight flooding the space, a wide view of the river in the distance. Alexandra Ashcrafthoff stood by the window, coffee cup in hand. "I was starting to wonder if you'd change your mind," she said, still looking out. "I almost did," Bernard admitted, "right before I walked out the door. But I'm very glad you came anyway." Bernard walked slowly around the space. "This place feels different, less cold." Alexandra turned, a faint smile touching her lips. "It's just the beginning, Bernard. Now it's yours." And for the first time in a long time, Bernard felt it. An unfamiliar warmth, a chance to rebuild, to be seen, and to change things for those who had once been invisible. "That's intentional," she replied. "This entire floor is yours for the new department." "Still trying to convince me to take the job?" Bernard raised an eyebrow. Alexandra smiled. "I just want you to know this door is open. And if anyone deserves to design an employee welfare program, it's someone who knows what it feels like to be overlooked." Bernard gazed out through the clear glass. The river glinted, boats slipping beneath the bridges. "I've never had an office. The only keys I ever owned were for a supply closet and a mop cabinet." "Then it's time you had another key," she said calmly. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked, finally looking straight at her. Alexandra didn't look away. "Because when I was lying on that floor, right between life and death, I realized I didn't deserve half the respect people gave me. Not the way you did. Power without responsibility is just an illusion. And I've had enough of that illusion." She pulled out a thick sketch pad and marker. "All of this is yours." Bernard opened to the first page, completely blank. He drew a deep breath and began. "I want windows in every working room, real light, no more break rooms that look like broom closets. I want a real welfare fund, transportation support, childcare, rent assistance, not just a couple of yoga classes for the sake of pretty photos." Alexandra scribbled notes quickly. "You're demanding," she said. "I'm not here to demand," Bernard said, voice firm. "I'm here to build." An hour passed. The sketch was filled with boxes and arrows. Support offices, counseling rooms, a space where employees could wait for their kids, a quiet area for night shift workers. "So, am I supposed to take this as you saying yes?" Alexandra asked. "I'm saying yes," he nodded. "Not because I want to work for you, but because I want to work for the people you, and this whole system, used to forget. People like me." "That's the best yes I've ever heard," she replied. Bernard paused at the doorway and turned back. "Thank you, Alexandra. Not just for the job, but for choosing to see me." "I should have done that sooner," she said quietly. "We all see things too late at some point," he said, smiling. "What matters is what we choose to do once we finally see them." Across the city, in a dim conference room lit only by warm yellow lamps, Tyler Bygam poured bourbon with a trembling hand. The news had reached him, and it made him feel sick. Alexandra was building a new department, and she had just put a janitor in charge of it. Tyler glanced down at his phone. The image hit him full in the face. Bernard standing beside his daughter in the press release. The headline screamed, "Ashcrafthoff appoints Bernard Kellerman as Director of Employee Welfare Initiative, a step toward justice in the workplace." Tyler's jaw clenched, veins standing out along his neck. For years, he had been the one crafting this HR ecosystem. Quiet firings, hush agreements, files pushed into the dark. And now a man from the supply closet had been handed a chair Tyler had always seen as an extension of his own power. He dialed a number. "It's Bygam. I need something done quietly. Off the books. Find me anything on Bernard Kellerman, old debts, erased records, juvenile offenses, anything. I want him discredited. That's going to cost you." "I didn't ask the price," Tyler growled. "I asked if you could do it." The next morning, rain hammered the windows like impatient knocking. Bernard stood by the sink, holding a mug of cold coffee without realizing it. A strange feeling sat in his chest, tense and uneasy. His phone buzzed. A message from Fiona. "Call me now. Something's up." Bernard dialed immediately. "There's been a leak," Fiona said, getting straight to the point. Your old eviction records, hospital papers, even a sealed juvenile misdemeanor. Someone's trying to smear you, Bernard. Brigam, Bernard said softly, without needing to think. Alexandra is furious, Fiona added. Let her be, he replied, voice oddly calm. I'm not hiding. When he arrived at the Ashcraft-Toft Annex, the air was strung tight like a wire. Rumors had raced ahead of him, but Bernard walked in with his head held high. On his desk lay a bright bouquet of sunflowers and a handwritten card. The truth is always louder than the noise. Keep walking. Within an hour, he called for an all-staff meeting. The room filled quickly. Administrative staff, security guards, cafeteria workers, maintenance crew, day shift cleaners, night shift cleaners. Bernard stood before them with no notes, no slides, just his hands trembling slightly. Some of you have probably seen the headlines, he began. There are people who want you to believe that a person's past is enough to erase their future. That one mistake, one messy record, should be enough to silence you forever. He walked slowly along the front row. I don't believe that. Yes, I've faced eviction. Yes, I've had overdue bills. Yes, when I was 16, I had a minor charge for stealing cough medicine for my mom. She was sick, and we didn't have the money. That record was sealed years ago. He drew a deep breath. I'm not ashamed of any of that. Those things are part of who I am. This space was created for the people who never get a seat at the big table. For those who've cried in the supply closet and still walked out smiling the next day. For those who've been ignored but kept working anyway. You don't have to be perfect to fight for justice. You just have to be willing to show up. And I'm standing here. A thick moment of silence hung in the air. Then someone started clapping. A second pair of hands joined in. A third. Within seconds, the room erupted in applause, rolling like thunder, swelling into a pulsing rhythm that filled every corner. Across town, Alexandra sat with her legal team in a conference room, a screen crowded with emails and documents, proof of the smear campaign. I want his badge revoked, Alexandra said, voice cold as steel. Today it's ready, Fiona replied. And one more thing, Alexandra continued. Anyone who targets Bernard Kellerman is targeting this company's core values, and they will answer to me. 6 months later, Bernard stood on stage at a national conference on labor justice. This time, he wasn't appearing with a mop and a cardboard ID badge, but with a presentation, a team, and his name printed clearly on the main speaker lineup. The welfare program he had designed was now officially launched across the company. In its first month alone, more than 200 reports had been submitted. 7 managers had been fired. 12 employees had been promoted after unfair evaluations were reviewed. Molly sat in the front row, legs swinging, eyes shining, her proud smile impossible to hide. Janet, stronger now after months of physical therapy, clapped the loudest every time Bernard's name was mentioned. Alexandra chose a seat farther back, letting the moment belong fully to him. Bernard glanced across the room at the sea of faces, people who had once been invisible, overlooked, forgotten. And for the first time in his life, he realized he was no longer alone. He was seen, heard, respected. When he spoke, his voice carried beyond the auditorium, through the city, through the lives he had already touched, and into the hearts of those who would one day follow in his footsteps. Justice, he thought, isn't a privilege, it's a responsibility. And today he had begun to live it. Bernard didn't take the spotlight to show off, but to be heard. My name is Bernard Kellerman, he began, voice low but steady. And I'm not the kind of flawless hero you usually see on posters. A few soft laughs rippled through the room. I don't have a spotless record. I wasn't born into wealth. I was a janitor, a single dad, a man who saw something wrong and decided not to look away. I didn't speak up for attention. I did it because real people were being hurt, ignored, manipulated, stripped of their voice, people like me. If that makes me troublesome, then I hope more of us are willing to stand up and cause that kind of trouble. When he finished, Molly didn't hesitate. She ran onto the stage, throwing her arms around him. You did so well, Daddy. Bernard laughed, pulling her close. We did well, sweetheart. This is for all of us. Alexandra stepped forward as the applause still rolled through the hall. You've changed this company, Bernard. Not just the people, but the culture, she said. We've still got a long way to go, he replied. Yes, she smiled, but at least now we're walking in the right direction. That night, Bernard sat on the balcony of their new apartment. Bigger, brighter, but still simple. Philadelphia stretched beneath him, city lights flickering like tiny promises in the dark. His phone buzzed. A message from June. We've been asked to consult for 3 more companies. They want to apply the model you built. Bernard smiled. Change was spreading. He wrote back, one safe workplace at a time. Molly stepped onto the balcony, wrapped in a blanket. Are you cold, Dad? No, sweetheart. He pulled her into his lap. I was just thinking, sometimes the worst things that happen to us are the ones that lead to the best things. Molly curled up against him. So now, are you happy? Bernard held her tighter and looked out at the breathing city. Yeah, baby. Finally, I'm happy. Father and daughter sat together on that small balcony overlooking the city. For the first time, Bernard felt truly seen. Not as an anonymous employee, not as the victim of scandal, but as a human being with a seat at the table. And he knew that from here on, he would use that seat to make sure others got theirs too. The journey of Bernard Kellerman shows that courage isn't always loud or grand. Sometimes it lives in small, unwavering choices. Choosing integrity over convenience, speaking up instead of staying silent, standing tall when the world expects you to bow. This story reminds us that justice doesn't ask for perfection. It asks that we refuse to let fear define our truth. No matter where you come from, no matter how the world sees you, your voice matters. And when that voice is used with clear purpose and steady conviction, it can become a force strong enough to change an entire system.